wanted to ask you, why Crow's Coffee? Why did you choose this spot?
Well, you know, it's neighborhood. You know, there's just something special about neighborhoods and the little places that you can go where you bump into, like we did this morning with, you know, friends from high school. And the other thing is, I love to support local business, entrepreneurs, people every day that are trying to, you know, provide service and carve out a living and make Kansas City special. I mean, that's what makes Kansas City special, is all of our little businesses.
And you bumped into someone from high school here. Tell me a little bit about growing up in Kansas City.
Yeah, so I'm the oldest of 9 children, and I grew up in the Brookside area. That's kind of been my neighborhood. And you know, I went to St. Elizabeth Grade School and Visitation Grade School. Rode the school bus in the mornings when I was young. Went to Rockhurst High School, and I'm coming back to Kansas City after I've finished my law school. I've continued to keep up with all of those people many years later. People literally that I've known since I was 6 or 7 years old or 14 years old. And it's just great fun. And I think that's what makes Kansas City special. It's kind of that big little town, or the little big town, however you want to describe it.
Yeah, definitely it has that aspect, right, for sure. So you also, after getting your law degree, you went back to Notre Dame, correct? Okay, what did you study when you went back?
Well, I went back to do a degree in theology or in ministry, and largely I was impacted when I came back to Kansas City as a lawyer. I was practicing here for 4 years, but I got engaged in this community, and that meant my faith community, but that also meant, you know, other marginalized populations. And you know, I was single, wrestling with those issues at that point in life. You know, what's the meaning of life? What do I want to do with my life? How am I going to give myself back to this community? And so I went off and spent 2 years to kind of take a deep dive. You know, if we say that, you know, faith is something that's really important to us, I felt that I had the opportunity to wrestle with those big issues in a really deep way, in an intelligent way. And so I went back, and it's greatly enriched my life. And I had no idea where it was taking me. I didn't know I was going to come back to law. Didn't know where I would go. But some people run to Europe. Some people immerse themselves in something different. For me, it was kind of immersing myself in the faith tradition that my family and grandparents and everyone had passed on to me.
What do you think were some of the most important things you learned during that time in your life?
Oh, I think I learned a deep appreciation, not only for my own faith, but for all expressions of Christianity, whether they were Catholic or not. I learned a great appreciation for all people of goodwill, even those that aren't of faith. I mean, it just, you have a chance when you're doing like that to immerse yourself not only in the thought of the day, but in, you know, hundreds, a couple thousands of years of human experience. And I was very taken by those big issues of life. And I think the thing I walked away from is the goodness of human beings. That's really where we encounter the mystery that we call by different names is in human beings.
And so you came back to Kansas City, you met Susan.
Right.
I'm going to flash forward a little bit, but Susan, you know, you guys have been married for a while, had 2 very young children when she got her diagnosis. Tell me about that and what that was like for you guys.
You know, that's a rock my world or rock your world moment. You know, many of us, you know, kind of have how we see our life unfolding. And Susan and I hadn't been married all that long, and I kind of felt, you know, it was kind of that perfect little life that was unfolding. I'd found somebody that I deeply loved. We had been blessed to have children. I was loving being a father. I had a good job, a law practice that I was growing. And then in a single moment, when that doctor walked out of the surgery room and said to me, "I'm sorry, Mr. Miller, your wife has cancer, the tumor's large and it's aggressive," everything changes at that moment. And I think how it shaped me long term is that you realize that I had a deep appreciation for people every day that feel that they're dealing with life and death issues, and they feel very vulnerable. And that put me in an area of vulnerability I'd never experienced. And so I always feel, whether it's people that are facing addiction or homelessness or a loss of a job, or just the struggle every day to make a living and support folks, those people that feel on the edge, we lived on the edge. And so it really changed how I looked at the world, I think.
How old are the girls now?
So that, Susan's celebrating 20 years as a cancer survivor, so they were 2 and 3 years old at the time. So they're 22 and 23.
Wow, what do they think of you running for mayor?
I think they're proud of me, but they worry because the political environment has become so toxic, and they love me, and they know that why I'm doing this. They know I don't have to do it. I'm not seeking this as a career. I'm not looking to do this for an increase in salary. They know the sacrifice that I'm making that doesn't have to be made, and they worry that that in this rough and tumble world, that people will be unfair, unkind, untrue, and attack. So that's what I think they're concerned about, as is my wife. But they support me, and they're proud of me kind of stepping off the sidelines to step up.
Why are you running for mayor? What made you decide to do this?
Well, it's kind of a long transition in life. You talked a little bit about my early upbringing. I mean, I grew up in a family that really left a great legacy of giving back to this community. It's a legacy just for parents to raise 9 children anymore. But my father did everything from coaching, junior high football for 17 years and forming so many men in this community, to starting with his good friend John McNeil, the Christmas in October program 35 years ago, that has renovated homes on the east side of our city, over 9,000 homes in 35 years, and that I had a privilege to participate in from the very beginning. He started Cristo Rey High School, which provides opportunities for African American and Latino kids to both get a great education, preparing them for college, but to get an introduction to the business world. Started an organization called Boys Hope that provides a home for talented African American kids that need a stable environment to help support their education. And then I threw myself into that as well. I worked in the Don Bosco centers for a decade, settling refugees, working with the elderly, with youth. But it was really, I thought that's where my life would unfold, would be in that not-for-profit realm, that I would continue kind of that family tradition. But 10 years ago, Kansas City, leaders here in Kansas City came to me and said, "Steve, we know your background as a construction lawyer, someone that understands infrastructure and is a problem solver. Would you consider getting into public service, and could we put your name up to Governor Nixon, who had just been elected, to serve on the Highway Commission that runs our Department of Transportation?" And I agreed, and the governor appointed me. I was confirmed by the Senate. And that took me into a world I never expected of public service, where I had an opportunity to lead the 7th largest transportation system in the country, and an organization that's bigger than Kansas City. So I've already kind of served in that capacity as a mayor does. So when you chair the Highway Commission, you have 6 commissioners in the same way the mayor works with 12 council people. And I had the chance to lead an organization that's bigger than Kansas City. A bigger budget, more land ownership, and more infrastructure. And what I experienced was that joy of being able to lead on something that was important. As a lawyer, I'd felt the thrill of representing a single person in the courtroom before a judge and a jury at the most significant time in their life. That was a thrill to me, and I found in public service, now I felt as if I was representing 6 million Missourians who were counting on me. The other thing I found is that everywhere I went, I got a lot of affirmation of people. I mean, they were pleased with the work I had done, and they were so delighted to have a leader that they felt they could identify with and that they trusted. And then people keep asking me, "What are you going to do next? If you ever get into politics, let me know. I'll support you." And that call from people just never went away. And I've always had that kind of internal call to serve, and I thought I could do what I was trying to do, in smaller ways and a not-for-profit. I found that this was an opportunity on a really big scale to make a difference for Kansas City at a time that I think is, I tell people, the most critical time in my life for the future of the city.
You mentioned infrastructure with your time with MoDOT. What would be some of your top infrastructure priorities if you were elected?
Yeah, that's a great question, because obviously we have huge projects like KCI Airport. And I've said publicly that I've been very concerned about the process that's gone on there. It's gone from crisis to crisis to crisis. And this is something that I have, a great deal of experience in, because I've spent 35 years sorting through problems on projects. And what I know is that when problems run into trouble, I'm usually called in to help solve them. And I can usually look back and say, where'd it go off the tracks? And usually I can trace it back to the very beginning. So there are lots of red flags for me on this project. And so Kansas City is going to kind of get a 2-for-1 with me. They're going to get a mayor, but they're also going to get somebody that if I wasn't mayor, I'd be the type of person you'd hire to make certain this project gets done. So obviously we've got the big KCI project, but I think also we see during this winter, people want the basics. For instance, people are sick and tired of the potholes in this city. Those potholes, not only are they an inconvenience, but they're expensive and they're dangerous. And it didn't have to be that way. And so, for instance, for the last 10 years, we have, even as we increase taxes to put more money on the roads, in the budget, we actually reduced the amount of money that we were devoting to roads. So what we're seeing right now in Kansas City didn't have to be. And so I hope to be able to bring some real knowledge and some discipline to making certain that we just maintain the basics here, roads and sidewalks, and that we pick up the trash. So we got to, as a mayor, you kind of got to deal with the small, little, mundane things, but you also got to deal with the big things like KCI Airport.
And going from planes to trains, the streetcar, has plans for expansion to the riverfront and to down Main Street. What are your thoughts on the expansion, and what do you see your role as mayor in making those happen?
Well, transportation is essential to the life of this city. And we have to have a comprehensive transportation system, and so that doesn't just mean streetcar. That means, we need to continue to invigorate our Kansas City Area Transportation Authority. We need to continue to have not only the bus transit we have now, but more and creative ways of getting people to jobs. But specifically on streetcar, yes, we've made over $100 million investment in that, and voters have 3 times authorized this expansion. But I think as mayor, you've got to make certain that we get to Washington, D.C., and we get the money to complete it. We need federal money to complete that. And what's exciting for me about streetcar, and particularly this extension, is that it's going to link us to UMKC. And I see for the future of our city very much tied to also a vibrant UMKC. If you look around the country, it's difficult to have a really great city without a great kind of research university. And we have lots of wonderful, universities here. We got, Rockhurst and Park University and Avila and St. Mary's and William Jewell. And I hope I didn't leave any out. But UMKC is the one that has the opportunity to be that anchor university, and connecting it. And what makes it special is that it's an urban university, so that streetcar makes kind of a seamless connection, not only down, into our arts community where our conservatory can link, but into the business community as well. And I think it'll help pull our educational academic into the business community. The other interesting thing about streetcar that I think is I want to continue to look at strategies to help to bridge the racial divide we still have in this city. We may have eliminated the legal impediments to segregation, but we're still a very separated or segregated city. And I tell people the one thing about streetcar that's interesting is, the streetcar, it holds 150 people. And what it does is when you ride streetcar, it gets you out of the privacy of your own little car, and it puts you in an environment, and you're not sitting down in your own little seat. If you're riding a streetcar, you're usually standing up, and there you're mixing with all kinds of different people from all over the city, maybe outside the city, and it gives you that feel of an urban vibrancy that can come when people mix. Now our challenge is in this transportation system, the irony is, we make streetcar free right now for everyone, but our buses that really move our working people that really most need it, they got to pay on a system that's not very efficient. So we need to kind of continue to work on that. And as somebody that's devoted, a career doing transportation issues. I'm really excited to tackle that. The city, Kansas City Area Transportation Authority, I think we can do a lot more on public transportation. And I think streetcar will help to form kind of the spine of that system, but we have to understand that it takes a lot more than that. And the buses and the scooters and the bikes and autonomous vehicles that will be coming down the road, those are all a great opportunity for Kansas City. And I have kind of a unique background and a bigger vision really than anybody else in terms of how we can pull all that together.
So I'm going to take a little bit of a hard turn, but another thing that's huge, and please drink your tea.
Yes.
I know it's quite the contraption.
It is a contraption here. I failed once. I spilled it a little bit a moment ago. I'm going to try. See, look at that. That is
wow, yeah, that is high-tech tea there. So you're not a coffee drinker.
You know, I never picked it up, and I don't drink tea all that much. Although I have to say, since I've been campaigning, I'm drinking a little bit more tea.
Yeah.
But I never picked it up.
Yeah.
So, but I get the vibe. I still like the vibe of sitting in a coffee shop.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so the other thing I wanted to ask you about is really one of the biggest issues confronting our city, which is the violence issue. So the first thing I wanted to ask you, in your opinion, what are some of the root causes of it in Kansas City?
Yeah, you know, the long-term root cause, I mean, if I had to put a single word to it, is hopelessness. You know, we're never going to eliminate crime. I mean, that's the human condition that's been with us always. But in Kansas City, we have, you know, a problem that goes way beyond what we should have here. I mean, you know the statistics. I mean, 151 homicides in 2017, followed up by about 135 homicides in 2018. Per capita, we're in the top 5 in the country. I mean, we're ahead of Chicago when we talk about all the violence there. So that's completely unacceptable. And so we have to do, there are strategies, I'm confident, because I'm always a hopeful person and a problem solver, that we can do to much lower the violent crime and homicides in our community. And so, you know, we won't have time to talk about it today, but I've kind of put together a 3-pronged plan for that. But I think the first thing we have to do, people ask me, you know, what's new under the sun? What are we going to do? And you know, we have to remember there is no single bullet for it. I mean, the root cause, long term, as I said, is hopelessness, and that is that there are people that don't feel like there's anywhere for them, anywhere to fit in, and they're trying to, they end up turning to crime, and often violent crime. And the fact that we have a city that's awash in guns means that, you know, it's very easy to act out. So in the long term, I think those things are working hard to continue to improve our education system. Not only the education, but then kind of clear pathways to a career. And that doesn't necessarily mean a 4-year college. You know, that might mean going through a junior college and getting into a great job like EMT, an emergency medical technician, or coding. Computer coding is actually in our junior colleges. It might mean going into the trades. Right now we have a shortage of skilled workers. And gosh, how wonderful for somebody to learn a skill such as a carpenter or a plumber or an electrician or a pipe fitter. Those are lifetime skills. And I think our challenge in this community is, first of all, to look at the dignity of work of all kinds and the importance of human beings to have the dignity of work, to feel like every day you have something that you're good at and that you like doing and that can help support you. And you can earn a fair wage. And I think if we address that issue of education and career development, you know, we remove some of the hopelessness for people. And I think that's a long-term solution, but that's a long-term play. People want to know, Steve, what can we do right now? So right now, I think the first thing we have to do is, I think as a new mayor, you've really got to come in and put a sense of urgency on crime and really spotlight it, maybe more than we have already. And we need to go through and make a real honest assessment with all of the stakeholders. So those stakeholders, you know, are obviously our law enforcement and prosecutor, but that's neighborhood groups and activists, and that's our not-for-profit, and that's our business community. We all have a stake in this. And I think we have to go through and make an inventory and find out what are the things that are working. And if they're working, how can we leverage them? How can we grow them? What are the things that were once working but have grown stale and have lost their vigor, and can we refresh them in some way? And then what are those things that just aren't working, and let's not spend more time on them. So that's the first thing. But then, I've kind of outlined, I think we have to look at some things that we can do citywide initiatives. There are some customized neighborhood initiatives, and then I think we have to look at the continued development of our law enforcement. And I could talk about some more of those, but I'll just stop there so you can.
Yes, and I have your detailed plan online.
Okay.
You mentioned education as one of the solutions to the hopelessness. What do you think of the mayor's pre-K plan?
Yeah, I absolutely agree that we have to do something with pre-K, and I applaud the mayor for getting the city focused on that. And since the plan has come out, I've really wanted to be able to support it. It had some problems when it came out that I think the mayor has tried to address and has done a better job of that. But that process led a lot of people confused, and it's and it faces some challenges in the fact that it will use up the last of our sales tax authority, 3/8 of a cent, and we're already something like the 8th highest tax city in the country. And this will add more tax. The tax that we're adding is generally regressive, so it falls most harshly or disproportionately on those people we're trying to help. And I think the other thing that's been concerning for me is I've watched this unfold, and I haven't taken a position really on this until lately. I wanted to see how the community was reacting to it. But what I'm finding is that many of those people that represent the populations we're trying to serve have come out in opposition. So all of the 15 superintendents that are here in Kansas City have opposed it. The NAACP, the Urban League, Freedom, and other groups that represent our African American community have come out in opposition. Now, at the same time, I've heard voices from people that just want to figure out something to do and say it's not perfect. It is a financial risk, but we can't sit on our hands anymore. The education of our young folks are too important. Now, having said that, I've held back saying anything on it because I really wanted to say I could support it and throw my weight behind that. But right now, I'm finding it difficult to support that. I'm still willing to be persuaded, but for the reasons I said before, that it's regressive. A lot of the people that are intended to benefit are opposed to it, find it really difficult. But I will say this, if it passes at the polls, I'm going to throw my shoulder and weight behind that and make certain that it succeeds. And if for some reason it doesn't pass at the polls, I'm not going to drop that issue. I think it will have served as an important conversation, and I'm going to make certain that we get those stakeholders back around the table and we hammer out something that we can get more support for. So I don't think pre-K is dying. I'm going to be behind pre-K one way or the other, either implementing what passes, or if it doesn't, learning from that experience and continuing to drive that. Because back to what we said, the people, if education is so important and the populations that are most vulnerable here, they're already way behind before they ever get to school, because the human brain is actually still wiring itself in those years, and we need to be attentive to that, and I will be.
Staying on the topic of Mayor Sly James,
yes.
How do you think that you would differ as a mayor from Sly?
Yeah, I don't know. I think I admire what he's done in terms of his energy, his enthusiasm, and what he's done for the city. And every mayor is very different in their personalities, and so you kind of have to be who you are. I think there'll be some things that I will definitely share with the mayor, and that is I'm going to share his enthusiasm for this city everywhere I go as a lifelong Kansas Citian. I'm going to share his energy. I've been blessed with a lot of energy in life, and I like to get out and I like to mix with people. And in the same way that he's been present around this city, I'll be present all over this city. I like to get things done, and he certainly has been doing that, and I'm going to be available to people. So I think we share that same passion and enthusiasm and creativity. I'm always looking for creative solutions to things. Couple ways will be different. He can sing, I can't. I've got a decent speaking voice, but I can't say. You know, I like, not as bright today, I like bright ties thanks to my wife, but I don't wear bow ties. In fact, I can't even tie a bow tie. I think I'll really work to be collaborative with this new council. We're going to have at least 6 of the new council, 6 new members on the council, and that's if all the incumbents get through. And I'm going to be really attentive. You know, there's times when you do need to lead, but I'm going to really work hard to understand what the hopes and goals are of this new council, both the 6 newbies that will be coming in, as well as some of the very experienced people that are already on the council. I do believe that there's a shared wisdom that comes from a collective body like that, and they are elected by the people. And we're not always going to agree on things, but I'm going to really, really work to make certain that we don't have a lot of drama playing out on the front page of the paper. And I have a history of doing that. I've been trained not only as a lawyer, as an advocate, but also as a mediator. And so I hope I'm both a good listener and a processor of information. But I won't be afraid to lead where I need to lead. The other thing I'm going to pay a lot of attention to, and I've learned some things as we've watched what's the really good things that have occurred, I'm going to be really attentive to process. I talked earlier about KCI, and that it lurched from crisis to crisis to crisis, and part of that was it just wasn't a good process from the beginning. The things that were done of thinking you could sole source $1 billion airport, and then lurching from that to trying to do a procurement process in less than 60 days. When I led our Department of Transportation, we did 10 design build projects, which is what KCI is, and we'd give people 6 months to propose. And I think I come with a real understanding that probably Mayor James didn't have, because he was coming in as a medical malpractice lawyer, and so he had a lot of learning on the job to do. I'm coming in with somebody that has 35 years of experience in these major infrastructure projects that we're in the middle of, plus 7 years of experience of leading in government, where I became very attuned to the importance of public input and listening to all the voices, processing that information so that you could arrive at processes and outcomes that were embraced by people. So that's probably where I'll differ. Same energy and creativity, but I'm going to come with a level of experience and background that he did not first as a mayor, which will be really important because this new mayor has got to hit the ground running, because he's, to his credit, he's pushed a lot of great ideas and initiatives on the table, and we're going to need a mayor that can execute on those and can complete those. And it's not a time for on-the-job training, and it's not a time for somebody that hasn't had the executive leadership. And so that's why I think this is the right time for somebody like me to step in.
One issue that's been huge for the council just in the past year really is the issue of incentives. Right. It's come up a lot. We've had some pretty drama-filled votes. I'm curious, are there any examples of incentives in the past couple of years that you have thought were egregious or inappropriate for the city?
Yeah, I have not had the opportunity to be down in the details as you need to be to really point out to you what I think were the boondoggles. But clearly, there are people in our community that think there were projects perhaps that shouldn't have been done. Many of them were well done, and we can see the results today. But I do think, as I go around the city, we hear a lot about, and it's just not TIF. Remember, tax increment financing is just one tool. But basically what we're talking about is there are 4 or 5 different tools or agencies within our EDC, our Economic Development Corporation, that we use. And really if we think about it, it's where do we want to make an investment that should, if we do these properly, we should actually be growing our tax base long term. And that's our challenge. What I've said is what I think needs to be done. And we see it because there are people that feel left out. that, you know, they talked about the examples of the city focusing on luxury condominiums has been the latest thing. I think we need to understand there's been a lot of good things going on, but times have changed. You know, we do have, you know, it's a different world today than before. So let me give you an example. What we do right now too often is we're looking at just one project at a time and analyzing it in isolation. We're not often saying, how does this particular project fit into a bigger overall plan? And what I've said, and now some of the other candidates are starting to pick up on it, I pointed this out in our mayoral debates, is I started asking people, does anybody know what the plan is for our city? I mean, who would run a business? Even our Crow's Coffee Shop where we are this morning has a business plan, I'm sure. Who would have run something without a plan? I said, does anybody know what our plan is? And generally, even urban planners sometimes go blank. The reality is, we do have a plan. It's called the Focus Plan, but it was adopted in 1997. At the time it was adopted, it was only intended to have a shelf life of maybe 20 years. That's expired, but the world has so changed since then. So I tell people, you know, in 1997, this didn't exist, okay? This is my iPhone, but smartphones didn't exist. And I ask people, does anybody know when the iPhone debuted? And it was not until 2007. And think about how that's changed the world, and will continue to change what we do in an urban environment and how that fits into how a city functions. 1997, our downtown was a shell. There was no Sprint Center, there was no Power and Light, there was no crossroads, vibrant crossroads, there was no streetcar. And so the world's changed. And so we did things and we had plans that were trying to get us started. Now we're started and we're moving. And so what I've said as mayor, what I'm going to do is we need a new focus plan. I call it Focus 2020. Not only for the year 2020, when I think it would be completed, but 2020 as in clear vision and foresight to the future. And the reason I say it's important to incentives is because we have to be able to get all of the stakeholders together. All those people right now that feel like they're not being heard, people that feel like they're left out, whether that's on the east side or the north side of our city or the south side of our city, all around and say, this is the city that we want to be in the future, that we want to create. And then once you know that, then you can overlay over that, how should our economic development occur? How should we use our tools? So that each project that comes in front of you, you can say, how does it fit into what we would like to see? You know, the city doesn't and shouldn't be incentivizing everything that comes before it. But now you have a measuring stick, a plan in which it can occur. But it's also overlaying that plan that we should say, how are we going to address affordable housing? Where should we be putting our resources there that makes sense in the context of a bigger plan? You know, also what's important to any great urban center is the arts. And so we should overlay that. How do the arts fit into that? Everywhere from making certain we don't displace what's going on the crossroads to seeing that we connect and reinvigorate 18th and Vine. That our jazz museum isn't just a museum, but how do we encourage new artists and music to occur in the 18th and Vine area? Those are the type of things you can do when you put together this bigger vision, and that's what I'm calling for. Because that bigger vision also allows us to address, for me, the big issue is, what can we do in creating this city that's going to make us more diverse, okay? Help to heal the segregation we've had in the city? What can we do that's going to make it more equitable? That is, you know, fair for everybody. What can we do that's going to make it more inclusive? That everybody feels that the prosperity of the city is being shared in. But some of that comes from stepping back from where we are at the moment and putting together this Focus 2020 plan.
You mentioned affordable housing. That's another really big issue right now. Who do you think is most impacted right now by a lack of affordable housing in Kansas City?
Well, it's people I would say would be kind of working poor. You know, so the people that are they're out every day trying to work and find it difficult to afford the housing, and of course then our aging population that may be on fixed income. And so affordable housing takes so many different issues everywhere from, what should we be doing when we have invested in, residential units downtown, like 1 light and 2 light and 3 light, about making certain that there are different income levels that can be accommodated in there. That certainly sparked a lot of conversation. We have to remember that's given the number of units that would be involved, that's really just a sliver of the issue. The biggest issue is what do we do with an aging housing stock on the east side, where we have thousands and thousands of vacant homes that we need to assess whether they can be rehabbed and then rented out, or whether they need to be torn down. Where our current projections are that we need 5,000 more affordable units, and how do we do that? How do we, even as we're rejuvenating neighborhoods like Beacon Hill, very high priced, how do we find, as we're around there creating affordable housing along the Truce corridor, as we're seeing investment there, how do we see that we don't displace people? The issue of gentrification comes up. And so what I've said with affordable housing is, when we talk about affordable housing, what you're talking about generally is how do you provide housing that might be below the market rate? And so to understand what market rate is, that is what would induce a business person, a developer, to come in and build something. They can't build it if they're going to lose money. I mean, in fact, I don't care whether you're a developer or anybody, if you're Crow's coffee shop, as much as you may like coffee shops and have a passion for it, you don't run it at a loss, right? That's how you go out of business. So when we talk about affordable housing, that means in some fashion we, as a community, have to subsidize it, invest in it somehow. And that's really complex because the city has limited resources. And any kind of, if you look in other cities like San Francisco or Detroit, what they're trying to do is to say the affordable housing is such a big issue that we're going to have to draw from lots of different pots. So that means, as a mayor, I think you're really advocating with other mayors in the country that we have to reinvigorate what happens at the federal level. And so currently in the current administration, HUD is kind of being underfunded, and we're not getting the money we can there. And again, those are our tax dollars that need to come back to Kansas City. In Jefferson City, we have a legislature that's often dominated by rural agendas and doesn't appreciate all the time the challenges we face in an urban environment. That means getting down and pressing that issue. That means the city doing what we can do with our limited resources, but that also means reaching out to other stakeholders, like businesses that may have an interest in that, charitable foundations. So if we see in other cities, what they've done is they've used a variety of different sources to try and build trust funds and other vehicles to make it happen. So going back to what I said before, I think, as a mayor, we're hearing the cry for affordable housing, and as part of this bigger vision for the city, we need to bring all those stakeholders together and come up with a plan as to how we're going to address affordable housing in a comprehensive, holistic way, and not just jumping from crisis to crisis.
Thank you for sticking with me. I know we're going through a lot of different things. Okay. I'm going to double check my list and make sure I'm not missing anything.
You got a pretty big agenda already for the next mayor.
Yeah, it is.
Any one of those is a project in and of itself.
It's true. There's a lot going on. So it's hard in a field of 11 to stand out, to get time to talk about your issues. I mean, you guys have a forum every night, but you're limited at 1 minute for responses.
Yes,
and
crazy.
So how do you think that you stand out in a field of 11 people?
Well, first of all, the forums drive me crazy a little bit because there are so many, and it's a frustrating format. In 1 minute, what are you going to do on affordable housing? In 1 minute, what are you going to do on crime? And you have 10 candidates up there, and even my eyes glass over it a while. But you have to remember, what people don't see is for me, this is a conversation that has been occurring for a year and a half, where I've been getting around. I tell people I've been in people's living rooms, in boardrooms, in bar rooms if necessary, or coffee shops, and talking with people. And that's allowed me to both learn and get smarter, but it's also allowed me to develop relationships. And those relationships, you know, people don't see. Those are quiet. Those are quiet little tentacles going out through the community. And so I think you can see that a little bit, even though, you know, I'm the political outsider. I don't appear daily on the public access network. I'm not in the Star daily. I'm not down at City Hall daily. But you can see in the most recent polling that out of the 11 candidates, you know, I'm in a statistical dead heat for the top position in the race. And I think a lot of that's been the hard work in the community. The other thing is, you know, the things that I talk about being as mayor, this just didn't start when I signed to be a candidate. You know, so I've been working on these issues for my whole professional career. And that really distinguishes me from the other candidates. I mean, first of all, I've had a lot longer career. You know, I was practicing law and engaged in this community before a number of the candidates were even born. And those relationships have been very informative, and you know, I can draw back on those now. But you know, I think the things that distinguish me, 6 of the candidates are city council people. I think as an outsider, I have this kind of unique thing of an outsider is that I'm not been tied up in all of the wrangling that goes back and forth on the council. I really can come in as somebody that can be a unifier, that I haven't, you know, I'm not identified in one camp or the other. I think I can come in and bring a fresh perspective, and that fresh perspective is informed by leadership at a state and a national level that really no one else has had. I think particularly since I mentioned that what Mayor James has left on the table for the next person, so much of it's tied to infrastructure, over $6 billion. As I mentioned, I will come in immediately with an experience and expertise that no one else will have, that will really allow me to get up and going quickly, and I think people appreciate that distinguishes me from the other candidates. You know, and that training as both an advocate in the courtroom, somebody that over the years has tried multi-million-dollar cases all over the country, and you know, that's all about persuasion. And you know, since we talk about the mayor kind of being in a weak mayoral system, it's about persuasion. And so that's what you do as a trial lawyer, where you know, while we have lots of lawyers that are running, you know, nobody's an experienced trial lawyer who has really, you know, across the stage had to take facts and evidence and marshal those in a credible way and present those to judge and juries. So as mayor, you're kind of doing the same thing. You've got to take facts and you have to persuade council people and you got to persuade the public. I think that's something else that really distinguishes me. And then kind of you know, on individual issues. So you talk about crime. So, you know, we have to approach that, but I'm the only one. I mean, Lisa Kennedy and I have both served during our career as assistant Jackson County prosecuting attorneys. I did it my first year out of law school, and I actually gave my time to the people of Kansas City to do that. Now, I also helped me become a good trial lawyer because I've got a lot of trial experience. But I've had an opportunity to work directly with police and prosecutors and detectives, and I had a chance to see every day the people that try and make our criminal justice system work. But I've also happened to see the limitations of it, you know, the human limitations. Come from full circle, I'm the only one, you know, I recently handled a police brutality case. I'll be quick to say, it wasn't Kansas City PD, but I had the chance to see that from a different perspective. I had a client that was stopped wrongfully, was taken down, his neck was broken, and he was rendered a quadriplegic. And I had a chance to get in and use my tools as a trial lawyer to take the testimony, you know, from the arresting officer right up to the chief of police. And you know, I saw some of the shortcomings that we have sometimes. And so when I approach this, I'll approach it with a body of experience that nobody else has. You know, on issues like civil rights that are important in a city. Again, I'm the only candidate. You know, I've worked for 25 years with minority business enterprises and women business enterprises in our city's program to see that people get new opportunities. I've seen the shortcomings of that system and challenged it appropriately at times, but I've also championed it for the things it was trying to do. I have a hands-on experience that nobody else has. When I was leading MoDOT, this is when our whole world is changing with LGBTQ, and as the Supreme Court's making rulings, I observed that we weren't providing medical benefits to spouses of same-sex couples. And the Supreme Court recognized that, and we moved quickly to say, you know what, that's not right. We need to change what we're doing. And I had the opportunity in leadership to make that happen. Affordable housing issue, I bring again the experience that nobody else does. I mentioned the Christmas in October program with my father 35 years ago of starting that in the 9,000 homes. And that means that I've had a chance to walk so many of the streets on our east side. And so many good people have been nice enough to invite me into their homes and to trust that program to come in to their living rooms and dining rooms and bedrooms and help kind of remake their homes. And I've had that experience of one-on-one with people, of seeing how people live, and I don't think anybody else has had that, and that really informs a passion for the city. On our first responders, on fire and police, again, just interesting backgrounds. I was there back in 1981 at the Hyatt collapse. I was a law clerk at that time, but my father, with whom I practiced for 25 years, represented the company that actually fabricated some of the steel that went into the skywalks. They were ultimately exonerated, that company, but that meant that as a law clerk, I was down there the morning of the Hyatt collapse as first responders were still trying to free bodies right there on the scene. And ironically, I was supposed to be there that night myself, and I was held over late at work and was taking the bus home that night, and I remember saying, gosh, I wish I could have been there. Got back to hear the news unfolding, so I might very well have been there. But also, part of Kansas City history, I was representing the company that stored the explosives, the contractor who was vandalized when the firefighters were killed on Thanksgiving time 30 years ago. And again, I was inside the crime scene, and there that morning, and I saw, a melted fire engine. I saw one single empty fireman's boot, and I saw a fireman's helmet split in two. And those images of that raw scene will never leave me. And so I understand, what our first responders face. And when I was leading MoDOT, we had to complement the Highway Patrol. MoDOT has its own motorist assist program. And while I was chairing MoDOT, we had an African-American man, probably 35, 40 years old, here in the community that was kind of that good Samaritan out on the highway every day. His name was Clifton Scott, and I'll never forget. There was a drunk man, a lawyer, that ran through barriers and hit Clifton at 65 miles an hour, cut him in two, and killed him instantly. And I remember being there for his family and being at his church for the funeral. And so those life experiences very much inform you in leadership and shape you. And those are all experiences that I don't think any of the other candidates have had, that I think will make me a wiser, more level-headed, prudent leader.
You've mentioned in forums and here today that we live in a very politically divisive time. So, I have to ask you about Axe Media's involvement in your campaign.
Yeah. So, everyone that we use in our campaign, everyone that I have a contract with, we publicly disclose. And so anybody, all my opponents, the press, can all go out to the Missouri Ethics Commission, and every person that I have hired is publicly disclosed there. And so people can go check that out. And if people go check that out, for instance, they'll see, my campaign, this is a nonpartisan campaign. And I've really, although I'm a lifelong Democrat, I think the people that followed this know that, one of my best friends from high school, Senator Tim Kaine, who was not only a Democratic nominee for vice president, but also the head of the DNC, the Democratic National Committee. came here to Kansas City and endorsed me and introduced me as a lifelong Democrat in the process. But, you know, it's a nonpartisan campaign, and so I've taken that very seriously, because what I've observed is that we have become so hyper-partisan that we want to put labels on people really quickly. So we want to be able to label you as an R or a D for purposes of stereotyping you, because we want to see whether we're going to hate you or like you. And the wonderful wisdom of our system here is it's nonpartisan. So when I put this campaign together, I said, I'm going to embrace that, because in Kansas City, we don't have to face the divisiveness that we have at the national level, where we can't get things done because it's all about party. And the same thing that I experienced in Jefferson City, we don't have to have that here. So I intentionally put together a campaign where, from my kitchen cabinet, you know, Republicans and Democrats. And I'll use two names, for instance, that people may know because they've told me I could, that have been, you know, so I have somebody that, you know, on the Democratic side, Bill Berkeley, the nephew of Dick Berkeley, the three-time mayor, who has supported Democratic candidates for decades, very engaged in the life of this community. So he's been good enough to be a part of that. And at the same time, you know, Warren Erdman is a good friend of mine, and Warren was the three-time chief of staff for Kit Bond and one of the leading Republican fundraisers. And to have people like that, to see that we're all across the table, because it's not about being a Republican or a Democrat, it's all about being a Kansas City and determining what's best for our community. I have done that on my political team, and I have done that, I think that's the other thing that distinguishes my campaign from everybody else. I have openly said, this is a campaign that although I'm a Democrat, it's open. Democrats and Republicans, it's people that have the best interest of Kansas City at heart, and I've tried to create that big tent. And I've tried to move Kansas City forward past the national debate and past the Jefferson City debate, the state debate, to find where are the things we can agree upon and to be that bridge builder, because I think that's what the mayor is supposed to do. But going back, if you would look at, if you go back and look at our MEC reports, you would see, for instance, you'll find one that person that we contracted with was the Gepford Group. Well, not only you had Tim Kaine, who was the head of the Democratic National Committee, but the Gepford Group was Lauren Gepford. And Lauren was working for my campaign, but she had to move on from there because Jean Peters Baker hired her to be the executive director of the statewide Democratic Party, as an example. You know, and my political fundraiser probably comes from the Republican side. So, you know, it's a campaign that, you know, that I'm happy to say is both bipartisan and nonpartisan. So that's where I sit.
So for people who might not have time to go and look through all of the filings, right, is Jeff Rowe or any of his companies working on your campaign?
So I have, first of all, with Jeff Rowe, Jeff and I are probably, in terms of how we view politics, about as far apart from one another as you could be on the scale. I have never met Jeff Rowe. I have no contract with Jeff Rowe. I'm not advised by Jeff Rowe. All the decisions on this campaign are mine and mine alone. My campaign has no contracts with any Jeff Rowe entity, period.
Okay. Is there anything I didn't ask you that you wanted to add?
Yeah, there is, and that is kind of, you know, we got down in the weeds a little bit. I think I'd like to kind of share with you kind of my bigger vision for Kansas City of how all these pieces come together.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I like to say, you know, we all these issues that we've talked about today are really, really important. But at the same time, while we're tending with the issues of the moment, we also have to look at the bigger vision of where we're going with Kansas City for the future. And I talked earlier about the importance of us having a plan. So when I was leading MoDOT, we would have both a 5-year plan and a 20-year plan that would help guide us. But those plans have to be informed by kind of that bigger vision of kind of, you know, who do we want to be when we grow up? And that's what again, I think really I have that opportunity, that perspective that really none of the other candidates do. So let me share with you my vision. And I do this in a really personal way, and that is I have 2 grown daughters, one right now that works in Chicago, the other that's just finishing up her university education, and she hopes to be moving to New York. I want to create that city that our young people want to return to, because they don't have to. This is a big world. They can go anywhere. But I want them to come back to Kansas City because they think that Kansas City is a great place for opportunity and is the type of city they want to live in. But also I'd encourage people to think about it from, people that are trying to recruit talent into Kansas City or retain talent. And so I ask people to imagine that someone's coming to Kansas City to assess whether this is the city where they want to live. And this is the vision I have for Kansas City a decade or more down the road. Now this is a vision that may never come true, but we at least have to dream that and decide what we're heading for. But let's envision that we're sitting in an airplane and we're flying in 10 or more years from now into KCI. And the first thing that we notice is that, you used to come in to KCI and you would see cattle grazing next to the runway as you come in. But now what we've done is those 10,000 acres that we have that surround the airport, we have strategically developed them so that they are now maybe a technology center or light industrial or a logistics center, and things that tie into who we are as a city and into our international airport. And we land at KCI and we walk out into a terminal. And we have the same feeling that I did as a little kid in Kansas City when I could go down to Union Station, and I would walk into Union Station and I would look around at that station and I'd hear the hiss of the trains down below, and I'd say, wow, this is a city on the move, and this structure really reflects a people that have high dreams and aspirations. That's what KCI will look like, I hope, under my leadership. And that we walk out of KCI and we have public transportation that can get us quickly and swiftly down to our downtown core. And as we come down, we're approaching that Missouri River. And before we get to the bridge, we can kind of see that the city that has turned its back on its river for decades has now turned towards the river on both sides and has embraced it. And 10 plus years from now, people are working and playing and enjoying and living in the areas around the river, from west of the Buck O'Neill Bridge to east of the Bond Bridge. And the city has finally turned towards the river. And right now, where we have a bridge that's old and falling down that dumps 45,000 cars a day into a stoplight, that's now been replaced by a new bridge that's been realigned that provides high-speed access to the south part of the city and the southwestern part of our metro area, with safe exits that come into the downtown area. And when you swing into the downtown area, you notice that that North Loop is no longer there. That we have taken that back and have reconnected our downtown area with our riverfront to embrace that heritage. And that, you look and you say, wow, that's opened up space, and we've done what every other major city has done for the last 4 years. We've been able to recite a baseball stadium to ensure that our Kansas City Royals stay here forever. And we forget that our lease is up in 2031, so that's only 11 years from now. And we find that by doing that, we now have 81 home baseball games that are right down in our downtown area. That's 81 conventions with 20,000 people that are going into restaurants and bars and enjoying who we are as a city and enjoying the river that sits right there. And people, for the person that's coming back to Kansas City, they can see the vibe and the energy. And the other thing is, all that excitement down there has helped us to realize that investment. All that tax increment financing and things we're doing, we've now managed to realize the promise of that because we've grown the tax base. And all that energy and excitement that's going on is generating tax revenues that have helped us better support our public schools and support our libraries and deal with our affordable housing issues. And if we were to move a little bit farther south, we can see that over what's now our South Loop, we've managed to put lids that have, over the top of them at various locations that have allowed us to create green space and maybe some real estate development that has connected us to crossroads. And we can see that we've done some smart planning in our city plan. The Crossroads has continued to maintain its character. We haven't displaced the artists that were there. They're still there, and they give that city a great vibe. And we can see that the Kaufman Center continues to anchor, a great arts community. And Streetcar's been completed, so we have the access of performers and musicians between our conservatory on the UMKC campus and down to Kaufman. And what's really exciting is that through our planning process, we've managed to incentivize and finally connect 18th and Vine, which is where our heritage is. If people say, what's Kansas City known for? What do they say? Jazz and barbecue. And where did it all happen? 18th and Vine, or 18th and Brooklyn, where, Arthur Bryant's and Gates and the old Municipal Stadium were. And we've finally been able, through smart planning, is to connect our Crossroads and East Crossroads to 18th and Vine. And now 18th and Vine is really humming because it's a part of that larger network. And we've put smart transportation in with maybe a streetcar extension into 18th and Vine that pulls it into everything. And what right now people see as a division, which is the Bruce Watkins Expressway that separates 18th and Vine from the rest of the city, we've redone it through architecture, just by architectural touches and lighting. Now it appears more as a gateway than a barrier. And all of a sudden, now we have a part of the city that's easily accessible by multiple transportation options from Riverfront to Crown Center to 18th and Vine that makes Kansas City to be that vibrant urban core. And if you follow me on the tour, we go a little bit farther south. And what we've done is we've taken Troost Avenue, that was once the symbol of racial segregation in the city, that now we have transformed it into the symbol of a city that's diverse and equitable and inclusive. And that's the place where a lot of the multicultural vibe of the city is, where people can, we've got multiple housing options, market rate and affordable, where entrepreneurs there are opening their businesses or their restaurants, and people are walking in walkable neighborhoods from 20th and Troost to 63rd and Troost. And it's become a symbol now of a city that has both embraced and reconciled its past to be an attractive place, which my daughters are crying for, a place that represents a cosmopolitan city of diversity. And if we move a little bit farther south to that, we see that right now what's a hazardous waste dump, namely the Bannister industrial complex, the old Bendix, that those 3 million square feet that are out there have been transformed into, again, maybe a light industrial business center surrounded with housing that's reinvigorated our Marlboro neighborhoods around that. And we've done really smart planning with that, where we've provided a cluster of work that's close to housing. All those things we need to be done. Now that's the city that I envision for Kansas City, that's going to allow my daughters to return, and is going to inspire people to stay in Kansas City and to come to Kansas City. But it all rests right now on who is the leader that can take us forward. As I said before, it's the most significant election in my lifetime, because Sly James has us dreaming big and tackling lots of things. But almost all of his work will be unfinished when he leaves office. Who is it that can execute on that? The public has given us tremendous support. 75% approval on an airport, 75% approval on our $800 million GO bonds, our infrastructure program. But somebody has to be able to execute on it and get it done. If we don't do well with that, that vision will never happen. We will crash and burn because we will lose the public confidence. But if we can do those well, we're going to build on this momentum, and we'll be able to realize that vision, whether it's the one I just articulated for you, with lots of big ideas, or something else. But we'll move this city forward. But it all depends on this next election. And I cannot emphasize enough how I think this is a pivotal point in Kansas City's future. Lots of good candidates in this race. There really are. And I have grown to like them, and I respect anybody that runs for office as they have. But at the end of the day, voters are going to have to decide, who is it that can hit the ground running? Who is it that, that has the relationships and the experience in this community? And I'm the sole person that, has started my own small business in a law firm and led that successfully. A person that's been deeply engaged in a multiple number of nonprofits dealing with marginalized populations, and had the opportunity to help start Turning Point, the Center for Hope and Healing, when my wife was diagnosed with cancer, lead that successfully as chairman of the board for the first 3 years, and incubate it in our law firm during the early years of existence. And then a person that's already led government, you know, in the Missouri Department of Transportation, bigger than Kansas City, at the highest level, dealing with all the big issues you deal with in cities, everywhere from first responders like the Highway Patrol, to working on pensions, to making certain that we plow and maintain the streets and fill potholes. I've already been there and done that, and that's the kind of leader that we need right now. Someone with both the vision and the experience and the proven leadership to get it done and get it done right.
Thank you so much.